I guess, and I've just posted or made the post to PWS. So the post is out.
Post is out.
And I'm here. Okay. So let's just wait a minute or something because it's not even 8 here. 1 minute left.
Oh, it's 11 here now. Well, by my
now it's already
clock, which is like a minute fast.
So we're on.
Right. We're on.
We're on, and something is not right. Well, everything is right. I'm on the chat as well, so that fits. So I think let's start.
Over a year. Over a year.
Turn the sound on. Hello and welcome to InConversation 13. Fern just said it, over a year. That is amazing. So, and it's the first episode of 2018. Almost didn't manage to do that because next Saturday, last Saturday, there was a work meeting scheduled, and then it was postponed to this Saturday, and then they said, well, no, it won't be this Saturday, but next Saturday. And so
they just don't want you there, Pete.
I guess so. Yes, probably. I rearranged my home office, as you might see.
Yes, there's actually a window.
Yeah, the window is there, and I just turned the desk around, and now I'm facing my bookshelf, and that is pretty cool because now I feel really smart by seeing all books that I never read, and I also feel guilty because I didn't read them. But, okay.
Oh, I'm so glad you feel smart.
I feel smart. Yes.
Oh.
And I'm well. And I also feel cool now because, like, now you're 3D. No, you're not. That's a 3D. I stole that from the movie. No, they gave it away.
Yes. So anyway, you want to introduce yourself and myself?
And welcome to InConversation 13 on January 20th of 2018. With me here on the show, my friend Fernando, qbn-scholar on Tumblr, also admin of luxlit.net, and of course also luxlit.tumblr.com. And and I'm also there. So my name's Pete. I like pictures, and I think that's enough. We're gonna talk. We have a really cool. I think we're a really cool topic, or two topics today. And one is about learning photography. How can we learn photography? How can we also, and I think that's something that really is something that kind of fits you as an educator, right? How teaching photography schools, is that something we is there any value to photography schools or not? Because that's something that frequently shows up, at least in conversations that I have, is something like a photography school, something you need to have, is a must have. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about that even though none of us ever went to photography school, right? So better shut up about that or not. We're also,
well, at least you studied video.
Heiko is on the chat.
Similar.
Heiko. And the link to the chat is, by the way, on the post that we made. So, and if you have comments, questions, suggestions, please don't hesitate to go either on the chat or message us directly on Tumblr. I'm sorry. So either message to TVOOM, TVOOM, or to Fern, qbn-scholar on Tumblr. If you comment on the posts we made on Photos Worth Seeing and on Luxlit, we won't be able to check them. So sorry, we can't do everything. So yeah, I have a question for you, Fern, before we start. Do you have any sort of photography rituals?
I don't know if it's a ritual, but I do have a couple of habits from when, oh my God, from my very first camera, which was, God, I'm old, about 35 years ago. That's fascinating. And I was thinking about it. I've been thinking about it lately, and I still do it. 5, 6 cameras later, I'm still doing this. Yes, damn. I always keep, even now that I have a good filter, okay, I always take off the lens cap and keep it on my hand that I'm supporting the camera with. Since I started this time around with DSLRs, I have yet to lose a lens cap. But I have this thing about protecting the camera and protecting the lens. So that's one of the things I do. Actually, there's 3 things. The other thing is I always turn the camera on, take the pictures, turn the camera off. I have gotten a little bit out of that habit when I am like like when I went to Carnaval in San Francisco, or when I went to the Folsom Street Fair. When I'm in that kind of an environment, when I know that I'm going to be photographing people and that they really don't know what's going to come up, I don't turn it off. But when I'm like walking around and maybe in San Francisco and taking pictures of buildings, let's say, or something like that, or I'm in the Botanical Conservatory, I will turn it off and I will turn it on. The third thing I do, and this I started doing with this stretch now of photographing with my D50, with my baby, is that I take the lens, the strap, the camera strap, just the strap it comes with, and I wrap it usually around my left hand. Because for some reason over the years, I'm becoming more left-handed, which I don't understand. I mean, I'm not losing the right hand, but I'm becoming more left-handed, and in some things, I'm totally ambidextrous. But it just feels right, because then I've got it wrapped around, and then I do this, and I've got, you know what I mean? And it's not too tight, so I can already have the camera ready, instead of having it in my right. And sometimes I'll wrap it around my right, but usually it's around my left. So yeah, it's not any sort of como superstition or belief or any kind of thing, oh, I have to do this, but it's just the way, for whatever reason, I work with the camera, and it's how I work with the camera. So those are my rituals, if you will.
That's funny, because I also have the camera strap usually wrapped around my arm, my right arm though. But I almost never turn my camera off, even if I don't use it. Like I always have it here. Oh, it's here. Let me check if it's on. I'm 90% sure it's on. No, it's off. But usually it's always on. That's my ritual, probably, if you want to call it a ritual. But I also,
well, do you?
If I don't have it around my neck like this,
never.
I also always have it wrapped around my arm like that. And it's when I see people around. I mean, I get it. The oops, the neck strap, and my sound is now I'm back. Sound was gone. And I'm not really a fan of the neck strap, so I was thinking about getting a different one. I saw one It was like kind of like a belt around your chest and back, and has this little, how do you call that? Like a ring, right? And that you put on at the bottom of the camera, screw it there, and you can just move the camera on that belt, strap, whatever. I thought if I see something like that, I might get it one day. But it's whenever I see people running around with bigger cameras and they don't have a strap around, they're just holding the cameras in their hand. It's just like, oh my God, I would never dare that. Never
Well,
dare.
it's funny because that's what I was going to tell you about, because I kind of like that system, and they have different straps and different. They actually even have a wrist strap. That same company that you attach to the bottom where the tripod would go. You just attach it on there, and it's this ring, and you're carrying the camera upside down. The wrist strap maybe I could use, because I would still, even though I've got that wrist strap and it's on my hand, I want to do. Oh, I can do it with this one. I want to do this. I want to have the camera strapped around and carried like this. I always want to feel double secure, strap and hand. If I something, okay, well, there it is, but it's in my hand, okay? And I always have a special way of doing it that makes me feel even more secure. But that whole idea of that belt that you're talking about, where the camera's hanging upside down, just makes me feel like that thing is dangling and moving. I need to have it on my hand. Actually, I took a photo of this guy at the Castro Street Fair who had the cameras, and one of them, he had the camera with another strap, and it was around his crotch kind of thing. And I'm like, dude, that thing, first of all, it looks a little, yeah. And then,
This guy wants to take. I mean,
yeah,
camera at my crotch.
Maybe if you touch the lens, it'll get bigger. I don't know. However, it just
use a macro lens.
No comments. However, but it just feels so vulnerable, and especially because he had like a I want to say maybe an 85 zoom or something like that. He had a bigger lens. He didn't just have like a flat pancake lens or something like that, like a 35 millimeter prime. So there was this thing protruding on top of everything else, and I'm sitting there going, I'm walking around and I'm at a store or something, and I can just see myself hitting, you know what I mean? It just doesn't feel. But again, it's each individual. He looked perfectly happy, so I thought it was fascinating. You know what I mean? So you never know. You just never know. It's again, it's what we always, whenever we talk about, what about this? What about this? It's whatever makes you feel comfortable.
Right. Definitely. Absolutely. But I think
now, why did you ask?
That's
the ritual question.
Why
did you ask the ritual question?
Because I have a list of questions here that our show noter, Gia, who always writes our show notes, sent me, and said, wouldn't that be a great idea to ask each other questions, especially if you have a guest, so using the same questions to with every guest. And so she sent me a couple of questions, and I will, over this episode, will ask you a couple of questions that are on the list. But I think what you mentioned, whatever you're happy with, that's something that perfectly fits the topic of today's show, because teaching and learning photography. And before we went live, we had a short chat about things that we both read on the web about, and especially one comment. We don't want to mention names or something, but what was this one comment, and I also saw that, and I kind of sort of agreed to that, and there, because let's face it, most of the people, I don't know if there's anyone watching this this show who doesn't have a Tumblr or photography blog on Tumblr, or is in any way affiliated with the Tumblr photography community. But I'd say most of us on Tumblr are amateur photographers, hobbyist photographers, and there are not so many professional photographers. There are a lot as well, but I think the huge majority of photographers on Tumblr are like us, hobbyist photographers, amateur photographers, semi-professional photographers, whatever. And
But hold on. And what I find really interesting is sometimes the pros who publish amazing work, especially in portraiture, I want to say, don't get that much attention. And I remember specifically one Tumblr, and I've discovered it and reblogged several of several photographs from there, because I have to say, on top of everything else, I do like Bollywood films. But it was this person who had a lot of photographs of Bollywood film stars, other people, but mostly Bollywood film stars, including Amitabh Bachchan and Shah Rukh Khan, including pictures, a couple of pictures of them together. They were stunning fashion photography, and maybe 3, 5, 10 votes. And this person is a professional. I mean, you don't get Shah Rukh Khan and Amitabh Bachchan, who I don't know if anybody else knows who they are, to pose together for you in a studio unless you are a big honking name in photography. Yet they get very few. Notes, and it was a 365, posted for 365 days, and then poof, I never saw anything again. So you never know. I mean, that's, by the way, that's one of the things that I've always wanted to talk about. So thank you for bringing that up. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
But do you think, I mean, if we're already talking about that, do you really think that the amount of notes has anything to do with and I use that term very, very cautiously. I just use it now for the lack of a better term. That has anything to do with the quality, like the sheer technical quality and imagination of your photos. I mean, as I see it, there's a huge difference between between a platform like Tumblr, which is social media. There's nothing, and this, I don't know if that saying also exists in English. In German, German there's a saying basically saying there's nothing older than yesterday's newspaper. And I see it kind of similar with the Tumblr dashboard. That's why a lot of people reblog their own photos again, sometimes again and again, and they post a photo, then reblog it again to their own blog, which I can understand. I'm just too lazy for doing that, because not many people really scroll down their dashes every day or every couple of days completely to the last post that they saw. So and then there's a thing, what I found is that the and that has nothing whatsoever. I don't want to say that people who do that don't post great photos. It's just that the amount of likes is very, very dependent also on how you engage in the community. I see it myself. I can't be on Tumblr each and every day, and then there's this well-known Tumblr bug that you don't have every post of every blog you follow on your dashboard. Sometimes I don't see the post of a certain blog, or certain blogs miss posts for weeks. And just if I go to the blogs, and then, well, some people follow a lot of blogs, others don't follow so many blogs. I follow way too many blogs, and sometimes I just have to check out a blog after a couple of days or weeks, sometimes forget, right? So I haven't seen anything by that person for a long time. Let's check out the blog, and I see how much I missed. So and sometimes you get remembered by that, like, because you see a like or a comment by someone and say, oh, well, let me check that blog. So I think the way you engage in the community has way, way more to do with how many notes you'll get. And then there's thing, I mean, let's face it, the photos I make on my TVOOM blog are just photos that that's also this huge amount of likes. And I think everything that is more like 50, 60, 70 notes is a huge amount of likes, is because of reblogs, of blogs
Yes,
that not
yes.
necessarily have to do with photography. So I'm fortunate enough that apparently my photos hit the nerve of a lot of people, and many people want my photos on their blog. And that's just a thing that, with especially with portrait photography, that's not something
No.
that most people would want on their blog. Everyone can say, well, it's a nice photo of a tree, why not reblog that, right? So I think that's also a very, very big issue. Well,
But
not
I think
a factor.
right now, I'm not saying, and that was a good question. To me, I'm not saying that the notes, because there's one of my photos which got very few notes. It is still one of my favorite photos. It's a photo I took, I think, my second year. I'm so anal about remembering these things. With my D50, I took some great photos with my D50, which was even then like 6, 7 years old. So that's another thing that may come up one day. Camera quality and new technology, and now I've got my 45 megapixel yada yada. Bottom line is that 6 megapixel camera took some amazing photos. I don't know how they'll look in print. I may find out soon. But now with that picture, got very few likes. I think maybe got 1 or 2 comments. Yet I showed it to TJ. I think I've talked about this before, and it was one of the pictures that he chose as one of my best pictures out of the 100 that he saw. So to me, there's the subject matter, because this is just a picture of a strap. It's in black and white picture. If you take mainstream photographs, like of the sunsets, those are the things people like. Actually, and since we're talking about it, it's interesting we're talking about learning photography, because last night I went to a workshop on Sony products that was given over at Mike's Camera, the place where I bought the camera. And because I bought the camera there, but it was free. And it was fascinating, because when the guy was showing these photographs, everybody was going, ooh. No, not everybody, but most people were going, and it's a picture of a sunset, and it's a picture of a car. And I'm sitting there going, yes, technically they're nice. They're good. Would I reblog them on LuxLit? No. Right. And then I was thinking, how would my photography? How would people react? And I see that on Facebook, because I also share on Facebook the flower pictures, some of the more traditional building pictures and landscape. Those are liked. The more esoteric, the stranger, the more abstract stuff that I do, the urban geometry kind of thing, not so much. Does that mean they're not good? No. That just means it's different tastes, and there's different ways of looking at this stuff. You know what I mean? It's so what's popular isn't always. I mean, you have someone like Elena Morelli, who I don't even think posts on Tumblr anymore, and Frederick Yardley, who still does every once in a while. Stunning,
amazing,
yeah, stunning, and they're super amazingly popular. And I truly admire both of them. But does that mean that their work is better than mine? No. Not at all. I just have a different sensibility than not everybody. And that photographer with those portraits that I was talking about, on the one hand, I know that the count isn't important, but I also understand that it also just amazes me that sometimes these really good photographers, and not just portraits, but of all kinds, don't get the kind of recognition that I think their photography deserves. You know what I mean? It's not that the votes makes it better.
I think that's exactly the thing about Tumblr, or about let's say about social media. Like, I can speak about Facebook because I'm not on Facebook, but I presume on Facebook it's the same. If you put something out there that other people like to share, there's I see it with my photos, stuff that and we have to talk about that, so I have to at least mention that. That was really the big, for me, it was really a big disappointment when Grey Card disappeared suddenly, shortly before the top 5 end of the year Grey Card photo extravaganza, right? Because that for me was always in the last years, sitting down, going through my own archives, looking at my own photos, trying to see or to find what I did in that past year, and whether there's kind of a red line through that, whether there's something that I discovered, because that it's a process, and here we already are already at learning, right? It's rarely that you have this revelation and something changes suddenly. It's a slow process, and so this event for me was always the highlight of my Tumblr photography year, right? And then Grey Card disappeared and reappeared. I still doubt that this was the real deal, but okay.
Yeah.
But we'll probably never know, because nobody knows who Grey Card was, right? Okay.
Grey Card was.
And for me, it was always very, very rarely were one of the photos that I found particularly good, or that I was particularly proud of, were photos that had the big amount of likes or notes or whatever. But that is because, well, they're photos, you look at them, they're pretty, and they're easily reblogged. Like, okay, I want to have them. There's so many blogs out there most blogs actually, I presume, on Tumblr are not posting their own stuff, but reblog stuff, right? So, and that's that's how things go viral, if you want to call it viral in that case. So if you post a photo and then someone sees that on this one, oh, I want to have it as well, and then reblog it to their blog. That's how this big amount of notes, or other people see it on other people's blogs and like it there. So that's how this big amount of likes comes. How do you say? That's how you get a lot of notes, right? And if I look at photos that I think, from my photos, that I'm really proud of that shot, and this is a great photo. And it's always fascinating that with those photos, I get most comments by people. And all comments are from fellow photographers. But those photos are not necessarily the ones, or very, very rarely the ones, that even get my quote unquote average amount of notes.
Yes. What's your average amount?
It's just, I can't. I would say, like, average, I would say about 250 something. It's kind of the no, that's not the average. I'm sorry, it's not the average. That's that. I would say it's terrible at math. Like, I don't know, 400, 500 notes on average. If I'd say some have
on average. Okay, so my average is usually 25 to, well, about 30 to 40 is my average.
Like your Mozart,
and that includes,
I'm Justin.
The what?
You're Mozart and I'm Justin Bieber. I'm just talking about age, not about quality of photos. No, it's but
it's interesting, because the ones that sometimes get the lowest notes are the ones that also get, like you said, a couple of comments from photographers whose work I admire. Not necessarily even who do. Oh, I have a question, because I've always wondered about this too, but I don't think this is it either. I love when photographers or artists in general who have to title their work get really creative with their titles. And most of the time, believe it or not, even though I usually call somewhere or people or whatever in the date, I do think of really creative names for the pictures, but I would rather let the picture speak for itself. Okay. And I think that's one of the things, because I do think, as much as oh my God, as much as we want to say that, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words, that pictures speak for themselves, not always. And I think it does help when you have a really cool title, because I know that affects me when I look at a picture and I also see a really cool title. that makes sense of it, or that makes me think, or that makes me laugh, that makes me like that photo even better, because I know what the photographer at some point thought of, and I'm making that deeper connection. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I see it the same way. For me, it's not even necessarily the fact that the photographer had some deep thoughts about their own photos. For me, it's kind of, but that's really just me, probably. For me, it's like the respect for their own work. If I see some, well, people who just quote unquote post their photos with no title, no whatever, that's, like you said, photo speaks for itself. I understand that, I get that. But what I don't get, and that's not so often the case on Tumblr, I presume, but I see that a lot, or I saw that a lot on Flickr and 500px, etc. If people really post their photos and the title is the file name, like DSC, and then a number, and that's what is really, I think that show, for me, it shows that how they see their, of course this is like an assumption, right? But that's what I see, is that they see their photos just as products. So there's just, well, snapping away the next one, well, number 2, number 5, number 300, number 500, number 1000. And that's also, but again, it's just my personal opinion. If I see, like, because it distracts me a lot, if I see photos and then this huge text, which camera settings, what day, where it was shot, where I say, well, I don't care for the camera settings. If I want to see the camera settings, then I click on the little eye and I see the EXIF data if they're in there. But it's also like, how do you say? And I have to check that word. Give me a moment. It's one second. I wanted to check that word before. Oh, here there's an R missing. Okay, here it is. Perceptual psychology. It's a perceptual psychology that there's kind of a hierarchy of signs, that some signs are really and the more complex a sign is, the more you look at it. And like, there's one of the most complex things is written language. So everything that you'll write under your photos will totally distract from your photo. And it's very, very fascinating subject. So I don't really understand. Of course, sometimes I have like lyrics or poems that I wrote or something under my photo, but then my photo is an illustration for the text.
Right.
And again, I don't say this is right or I don't say this is wrong. It's just my personal the way I feel about that. And I found it fascinating when I read this article about perceptual. I forgot the name again. The word again. Perceptual psychology. That this is really something that seems to be very, very common. And so whenever I see a photo with this huge text about technical explanations and for me, this is just, okay, you're showing me photos that you made with that camera and these settings. It's not like you're showing me a photo and you use that camera and these settings, but you show me the camera and the settings by using that photo. So for me, this is rather, it's nice to see these, and this might sound extremely mean now, it's nice to see these test shots to prove to me that your camera is great. But I know that was mean, but it's just like how I operate. And well, others obviously see that differently, and that's the great thing. And that's also the difference. And it's also different in approaches, right? I think so. That's exactly the kind of difference. If you use a photo as a photo and then find, to come back to that subject title, right? To find a title for that fits, and you really ingested that photo and let it work inside of you and let it make some, you created something more than just the shot. That's why titles for me are very important, because most photos I sit on, like, not only would I shoot them and choose everything, but also then later in the editing process, I really usually every shot that I post. There was a time when I sat there like an hour or two for every photo, and then it shrunk down to minutes, and now I'm spending more time. I've been spending more time on each photo again, which is because there's really something that I want to show, and so I try to find a fitting title for that to illustrate my photo and not illustrate the title with the photo, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny, by the way, that whole perceptual psychology thing that you just talked about. One of the things that I do at work every once in a while is give workshops on how to use PowerPoint, and it incorporates the whole, public speaking as well, because it's not just PowerPoint. To me, it's the broader. And one of the things that is constantly pointed out as one of the top points in everything you read about how to do a proper or a good PowerPoint presentation is less words. Because sure enough, when you're standing there talking, if you're basically saying what's on the slide, or even if not, if you have a lot of words on the slide, people are going to ignore you and they're going to read the slide. And I know that that's true, and I still catch myself when I go to presentations and stuff, instead of paying attention to I'm paying attention to the words. So I hadn't put the two together for pictures. The other thing that I find really interesting is that you understand. I'm beginning to understand the technical aspect of photography. I actually understand now, because I remember one day you were like, "This is an f-stop," and I'm like, "What does that mean?" I finally am beginning to understand that. But it's interesting that you understand that technical aspect of photography because you understand it from videography, and that you're not interested in that, in reading that much technical information either.
Not at all. Not at all. But that's and I think let's finally get to the topic. What do you think? I mean, I have my very own opinion, and I started to say that we both were talking about a comment that we read somewhere about that if people who are or who were creative photographers and then went to photography school and completely lost their creativity, and I found that very interesting. Let me be honest. I see that very in a very similar way. And I saw that, well, you mentioned it. I was in film school, and then I did, even before I went to film school, I was involved in a lot of low budget and no budget film projects. And I did a lot of stuff. And I know a couple of people who did that before, then went to film school, and then suddenly everything became mainstream and became like smooth, and you see that in the perfection of their work, but it kind of lost that spark of life. So the question is, and I think that's a very legit question to ask, and I'm not the only one who sees that. Maybe we're a minority, but there are a couple of people who see that. But I also saw that with actors, like, and with all sorts of people in all these types of different jobs or businesses that have to do with different art forms. That as soon as you really learn something, it seems that everything becomes just like the same. It's kind of replaceable. Take this photographer or that photographer, or take this videographer or that videographer, or take this actor or that actor. And that might be, but they all can deliver the same. So
Right.
do deliver the same. So question number one, is it really the case? And so why, even if you're already a good photographer, why would you even want to go to photography school, do photography classes? So and I just saw a comment on the chat by two comments. I'm sorry. David Prados wrote, "Hello guys, I enjoy the conversation." Thank you, David. And Amy Montico wrote, "I'll take creativity over technically correct any day." So that's really a thing, that because it seems that many people feel that way. And I also see that a lot on Tumblr, like, or other social media. Like, yeah, well, technically correct is boring often. So why do we need photography schools, or do we need art schools? Can we even teach photography? So what's your take on that, Fern?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with what you said, because I don't disagree with you, but I will use myself as an example with writing. I've always been told that I'm a good writer, but there's being a good writer. Mozart, or let's go to photography. ¿Cómo se llama el tipo este, Dios mío? The one who shot the photograph of the cleaning woman with the mop. He was one of the few, if any, well-known. Gordon Parks. Gordon Parks picked up a camera, borrowed from a friend, went and took some pictures in this department store where they said they needed a photographer, had never taken photographs in his life, got the job, and he was a genius. He was like Mozart. He was like, I won't say Einstein, and even someone like Mozart and Einstein studied. They were geniuses, but they also their genius was fed by what they learned and by what they saw and didn't understand, and what they saw and didn't make sense. I don't know about Gordon Parks, but I know that these people are rare. Marie Curie, you know what I mean? They're rare. I learned how to write. It took me years. I learned the proper rules of writing to the point where I know how to write in different styles: technical writing, academic writing, personal, creative, yada, yada. Even poetry, even though I dislike it immensely. However, that did not also deter me from writing a dissertation that is in Spanglish and that does not always follow proper grammar, and that is in my own personal style. So no, I don't think that getting an education and knowing the technical aspects, if anything, I know that for me that helped me even more when I want to break the rules, because I understand and I can still play with them and help to have things make sense. And by the way, the people who read my dissertation and approved it are amazing academic authors and amazing authors who also play with. So yes, they appreciate that. And I think that's the other part of it too. I think where you go to school, who teaches you, and the more you advance, how those people influence you is a huge.
So it seems Fern warned me that it might be that his wife.
Maybe on.
Sorry, Fern.
Sorry, what?
You were away a couple of seconds.
Oh,
so the last thing I heard was the how people, or how your, well, I rephrased that, how your teachers influence you is very big.
So the person teaching you usually, and it's not, and I'm not making them sound but like bullies or evil or whatever, but they learn things a certain way and they're teaching them to you a certain way. They're giving you what they have, and what they know. It is very rare, again, like the professors that I've worked with over the years who have taught me, to have someone who on the one hand teaches you the rules, but on the other hand lets you fly and lets you soar and lets you be creative. That's a rarity, and I am blessed with that. Now I'm doing the same thing with photography. I'm doing, which I posted about. I did this thing last night where I want to learn more. I want to learn about lighting and studio photography. But that doesn't mean that I cannot bring in my creativity. But I'm also aware of all these things. I'm also aware that if I go to a certain place, like the guy who was talking yesterday, it's going to depend on who's there. A lot of the people who were there were people who didn't understand. I was surprised that I understood and pretty much knew a lot of what he was talking about, even though he gave me more information, which was wonderful. But there's a lot of stuff about the basics. Like I said earlier, I didn't know what an f-stop was. Is it crucial to know what an f-stop is? No. I've taken this Sony, the new one that I have, which is a beast with all these menus and all these things, and I've already taken some decent photos. Just knowing the basics of aperture, exposure, ISO, and the, what's that? The exposure compensation button. That's all I need. But that is absolutely all I need.
That's definitely, that's what I say. That's really everything you need. But
however,
sorry.
Go ahead.
No, sorry.
Go ahead.
It's kind of funny that you mentioned, well, that's not really funny because that's what this show is about teaching and learning. Because just this morning I heard while I was on my way to work, I listened to a podcast, philosophical podcast, and I found I thank goodness I had my little notebook with me because I had just wrote it down. And there was this beautiful sentence, which and I want to read that. It says, "You are the source of your teacher's authority. So only how much power you will give your teacher over your own thought process, over your own learning process. That is the amount of power, and that is the authority your teacher will have." And see, I don't have classic photography training. I have classic videography / filmmaking training. Before I went to film school, I did a lot of video already. So I knew a lot of the things before I went into film school, right? And so I will, again, I mean, I started this part of the conversation with that. I also feel that many people lose their I don't know if they lost, but if I look at their work, that a lot of things became very smooth and very
okay, you're cutting off.
Pardon?
Many people lose there, and then you cut off.
Okay. It might be because you're walking away with your Bluetooth headphones.
No, because I could hear you. I could hear you perfectly before,
okay.
and I guess so. Yeah.
What was I about to say? So that many people lose their special something, and the interesting thing was I had a discussion with, well, number one, the film school I was student on, and I worked for them later as a substitute teacher, and also in a different field as a videography teacher. And I had a lot of conversations, and I knew I think the correct word in English is curriculum. So what
curriculum? Yeah.
Teach, and I saw the curriculum of the photography classes, and of course, a lot of that what was in there was the history of photography, was a lot of technical stuff. And I had a very, very fascinating conversation with a photography teacher once, and that kind of made it click with me. And he said, well, my job is not to make my students to artists, because I can't do that. That's beyond my power. My job is to teach them the technical sides, so to give them the right tools so that they can survive in a professional field. And that's the thing. I mean, everything what's out there on and he mentioned that was what I found kind of fascinating, because he mentioned that they can survive in a professional field. I don't know if the translation does
Yeah.
justice. Because it's not only the technical side, because you can teach yourself the whole technical side of photography and videography. That is something that you can learn in just a couple of hours. There's nothing you can teach a 12-year-old to use a camera, and you can teach a 12-year-old to shoot full manual, and with a bit of practice. And it's also, I mean, it's the same thing. People say, oh, they're so talented, so talented. Talent is pursued interest, right? Everyone who just puts the right amount of time and effort into something can learn anything to a decent degree, at least. So at least so much that you can really work with that. So talent is 10%. That's what I was taught once in
Yes.
grad school, and the rest is hard work. So you
Yes.
be easier. But what I found, and that's also something that was really something. So what I really learned in film school, and I know that this, at least in the school that I was, it's the same with the photography classes, is communicating with people, learning how this business works, in terms of you have to do with people. If you're a photographer, you probably have to work with people who do prints of your work, right? And if you don't know what you're talking about, I knew that, or I had this problem a dozen times, because before I did all of that. Still later as well, I did a lot of theater and all of that stuff. So we always had to print flyers and posters and stuff. And then people give you photographs, or you have to make photographs, and then you have to give that to services, print that. And suddenly they demand stuff that you have no idea about. And so that's one of these things, to understand the mechanics behind that. So if I now communicate with a printing service, I know what they want, and I know that very often you have to do with people who don't really know what they're talking about. It's just like people who didn't even learn that, but just substitute for others, and etc. But you know
Right.
what you can do. So that is one of the. I think that's my personal opinion. I don't say that you can't learn that by yourself, or you can't teach yourself, but really having that kind of education and training, and knowing the rule. I mean, if you're an artist, in terms of you don't care for selling your stuff, then it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. It doesn't matter at all. But if you really try to sell yourself, to make a living out of that, I think photography school, or schools of that kind, are a really valuable tool, and to, especially since you learn how to communicate with people, and how to tell people what you want and understand what they want. And that's
but yeah, no, and it's funny, because you made me think. Okay, so there's a couple of things. That whole idea of the communication, and it goes back to that comment about, well, and the whole idea, which a lot of people have, of going to school will kill your creativity. And it ties into what you said too about, I'm just here to teach. It depends on the environment. It depends on you. I know one of the advantages I have as an older student is that, on the one hand, I'm very much in awe of people who teach, because I love teaching myself. I'm also very much in awe of people who got their PhDs, because I know I had an idea, and now that I've been through it, I know what it's like. However, I'm also old. And if you're going to try and bully me, or if you're going to try and be a jerk or a jerkette, because women can be jerks too, I'm not impressed. And so if you're going to try and be scary, and I will probably even drop your class, because that's the thing we have to do sometimes. What you said about the printing place, I understand technology enough. I mean, I work in technology and I understand some things, but I still remember, and I will still, and this is one of my guiding rules. I going into a software shop. This is 20 years ago when antivirus software first started to take off because it started to become necessary. I remember going into the shop and I was a little addled and I wasn't sure what the terminology was. And the guy who I was talking to was an obnoxious, inflated ego who obviously was very insecure and ridiculed me. And it's like, you know what? I've got the money in my pocket. I know what I want. I may not have the right words, but I'm out of here. Oh, no. I just walked away. I will go somewhere and I will find an environment where I can talk, where I can learn. Like, for example, when I bought this camera, the salesman was wonderful. You know, the camera does this, and oh, you're interested in that one. And he was great, and I understood, and I already knew what he was talking about. So, but we had that conversation, and it was a place where I feel safe enough now to go back and say, I don't know, help me. Because I know they're going to treat me like someone who has a brain. They're not going to try and beat me into whatever mold they want to. So there's that issue. There's also the fact that whole idea of, oh, and education ruins your creativity depends on the teacher and it depends on the person. And it's an individual by individual basis. And I can tell you, when I first started photography when I was in my 20s, and then when I went back to it in my 30s, I didn't care about learning photography because I thought that the whole thing was, what happens with a lot of us, I'm sure. Oh, you photograph? Oh, I want to walk around with you one day so I can learn how to take pictures. No, I'm sorry. No. And it doesn't happen that much anymore. But every once in a while I get that. And that's the way I used to think. I can pick up a camera.
Now everyone can take pictures, right? And
that's great. And I'm not against that.
I don't mean it in a sarcastic way. I really
yeah.
I think that whole technical side, how cameras really take away the necessity to learn the technical side, is a wonderful, wonderful thing. We had this discussion when I was in university. I did a class on video tech, on the technical side of videography. We had that. This was before I went to film school. I studied drama, so we had that class about how to really record a stage play, stuff like that. And our professor said, and he didn't. It wasn't his claim. He just said there are people out there who say that with video, and back then it was still analog video.
You're old.
I'm old. I learned analog video. That's what I was taught in film school, analog video. So I learned analog, and I still learned analog film. So to all of those of you who say, well, Pete doesn't know what he's talking about when he's talking about film. I just don't shoot film frequently. I don't know what I'm talking about because I have an exam and I have a diploma, right? And I don't fucking care. It just isn't. That's also something people who don't know me take stuff like that seriously. So I'm just joking because it's true, but I really don't give a damn. The thing is, yeah, and he said that, and he wanted to start a discussion, and somehow the class didn't really engage in that. And he said, so that with the start of video, all the amateurs suddenly took over, and the art went away from filmmaking. And I thought back then, and I still think, that this is just the biggest piece of horse manure that was ever said, because especially who are the ones, just look at the filmmaking business, who are the geniuses that we call geniuses, the ones that are really make films that move people. Yes, some of them, many of them went to film school or have their degrees, but these all are people who from their childhood on had the possibility to do that, who's
Yes,
who got
but the
film cameras
possibility.
or photography. Let me just finish that. From their parents or grandparents, and who did that from the beginning, and then got their education and learned the business and learned to use these tools. Before that, yes, they had, and I think that is the great thing about this digital revolution, that everyone has the possibility now to make great photos. And a lot of this frustration in the beginning, you give your film away, that, well, you should roll a film, right, give it away and get it back, and like from 24 shots, like 2 photos are, and and you waited back then, you waited like a week or 2 or even longer to get your film back and the prints back. You paid a lot of money, and then 2 photos, and now you have this
And you didn't have control over how the picture looked either, by the way.
exactly. That's also something. You have no freaking control over the development process. Nothing. You don't know anything. And so people say, well, I learned. If you have a basic knowledge about photography, and if you know how to shoot, and you know the exposure triangle and all that, if you know that, then yes, please do yourself a favor, get a film camera, shoot film to get that into. But if you're starting out, there's, I put it that way, it would be stupid to do that, because that you're wasting a lot of time, you're wasting a lot of money, and you probably get really frustrated. And so this, right, I know that as well. And that's why, and here's the thing, and this, I want to mention that because I see it in my bookshelf. If you're in any way interested in filmmaking, do yourself a favor. If you want to know how filmmaking works, Robert Rodriguez wrote, and I got the book, wrote this wonderful book. It's a diary. His diary of making El Mariachi, called Rebel.
Oh, okay.
Brilliant book. He describes it. This is one of these Hollywood myths, right? Saying, "Wow, this guy, nobody knew him, came out of nowhere, made the Hollywood blockbuster." Bullshit. Yeah, this guy made so many movies before he made El Mariachi. It was never planned to be a Hollywood blockbuster. He made that, and he said, "Well, maybe I can get it into Mexican television." That was the idea, right? And
really?
Yeah, brilliant. Get that book. It's entertaining read, and also very, very insightful in filmmaking. And he did like medical studies to raise the money, and wonderful book. Wonderful book. And then, but that's what I want to say. Okay, he shot that all. He had that all, had said, okay, because, well, quality back then didn't shoot on video, but on 16mm film, because he had the possibility. Not everyone has that, right? And then he transferred that all to video, edited itself, and tried to sell it to television. So, okay, and he went from festivals to festival. Big piece of luck that someone saw that film who thought it was great, and then they took the original, and all the raw material went to professionals, and they re-edited and remade the whole film from the raw material. So it's not like this amateur who didn't have a clue about what he's doing, that he was already a professional, even though he didn't go to film school. But then the professionals took over and made that film suitable for theaters.
And he wasn't, and he didn't go to film school.
Sentence, because they learned the tools, and
that's it.
Thing.
That's it, and that's the thing, because it's the learning process. And it's funny because you mentioned the frustration. Again, I had like 2.5, 3 years, single reflex camera, cheap little camera I bought through Fingerhut. If any of you know what that is, you're old. I won't tell anybody. But it was a mail order thing where you used to get this cheap stuff. And Fingerhut, I bought my my SLR with a zoom lens. I don't even know how much, but I think it was like something to 120 or something like that. Horribly frustrated, horrible photos, spent tons of money getting these contact sheets, and horrible. Second time around, same thing. Oh, I can take pictures. I'm going to get a camera. I bought a camera. I bought another cheap camera, SLR. Same thing, because I didn't think, I thought, oh, I could get the camera because it's a nice camera, because it's a nice camera, because it's an SLR, not, if God only knows, it was a cheap camera. Maybe take good pictures. I don't know. I don't know. But the bottom line is no good pictures. I've been going through those pictures, almost no good pictures. Out of thousands, your first 10,000 pictures, as Henri Cartier-Bresson said, suck. He didn't say suck, but
my case, my first 50,000. I'm at 60 now, so I think I'm.
Oh, stop with the humility. But there's the learning, and that's what's made it different this time around. That I picked up the camera. I was after I was already in school. I was learning about cultural impact of images and blah blah blah. So I came into it with this desire to learn more about the images, and then eventually learn more about the technical, which is exactly what's happened. After like 5 years, I started to learn about the technical, because I realized that on the one hand, that old D50, which I picked up and learned on my own and started, how did I learn? I started learning by looking at other people's pictures, by talking to people, by getting on Tumblr and getting into discussions, by being on Lensblur, by then being on LuxLit and looking at photos and seeing not necessarily even what I like, but what captures, because it's not even always, I don't always like the pictures I reblog. But it's the learning process, and it's that engagement. And it's also, I agree with you, the engagement with community. And it's interesting because I thought about going to getting a degree in photography after I got my PhD. And then I thought, no, I know enough. I have enough of a support community. There's also, like I posted like a month ago, at work, thank God, we have lynda.com. We have access to lynda.com for free. So I have been taking photography courses on there. And there's a huge course that a lot of the stuff I already know. But here's the thing. It's great to go and refresh all of that, because you still learn little things. You know what I mean? And you still, you know what I mean? So you're always going back. Like the other thing is with my D50, excuse me, yes, I knew how to operate it, but every once in a while I would go back to the manual because you forget stuff and you get caught in a rut.
Right.
So it's not just about, and you see this with the professional photographers. I don't know about you, but I like watching documentaries about professional photographers. And you see it. They're constantly learning. They're constantly, like you said, engaging with people. They're involved in all of these other aspects that aren't the photography. And not even the photography, the taking a picture. This is the taking a picture. This is, let's see that I can fit. This is the rest of it right here. There's so much other stuff that it's absolutely amazing, but it's also a dedication. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. It's like, if you're a baker, I love watching the Great British Bake Off. If you're a baker, yes, if you were born to be a great baker, but if you're just a good baker and you stick there and that's fine. God bless you. But if you really want to stand out, if you really want to enjoy it, if you learn all that stuff, you know what I mean? And the same thing with whatever, gardening, you know?
Right, and that's the thing. What I meant, if you have any sort of training or education, that will always will help you. This is the base of everything for further investigation. And you once said that, I think it was either in one of the InConversations or it was in a photo critique, when you said, you are not a photographer, you are a certain type of photographer. So
yes,
and that resonated with me so much in terms of, yes, you don't know, it's a whole different thing being a street photographer or a studio photographer, portrait photographer, being a landscape photographer, being mostly, I don't know, sports photographer. I had to do a lot with sports photographers during my a couple of years ago, when I did mostly sports videography, and I learned a lot from Frank was his name, from Frank, about photography, because he was really an amazing sports photographer. And so we talked a lot about that stuff, and I did video, and I told him stuff that, and he told me about photography, and it was just learning from each other. And there's also something that that really blew my mind this morning because I listened to that podcast. It was also about teaching in general, and this is something that I, for myself, found to be extremely true. And that's what I try to also do in during these 2 or 3 years when I taught videography. It's I think that really great teachers do two things. Well, three things. First, they teach you the basics. They give you the tools. They show you the tools. They maybe even observe you and be there and help you. But with that, with working with the tools, because that is what you have to be able to. And that is, by the way, plugging my own podcast. This is one of the topics of the next episode, which will be published next week, probably.
You're cutting off.
I'm cutting off. Well, little sins. I was plugging my own podcast. The next episode will be about tools and will be about, well, no spoilers. You need to listen to that.
No spoilers, no.
And the next thing is that they are there to open doors for you, show you different ways to see. You can bring a horse to the water, but it has to drink itself, or what is the saying? So they can show you doors, maybe help you open the doors, but you have to walk through them yourself. And that is so nobody will take the work off you. You have to do it yourself. And the third thing is, and that is, I think, what is the difference between a good teacher and a great teacher. A great teacher will always strive for making or helping you to become independent from them. So they want to bring you in. I think you mentioned it before, like help you spread your wings and fly. So go your own way. A plane only can fly if it has wings, like a bird only can fly if it has wings. So they help you to construct the wings. They won't build you the wings, but they will help you to construct the wings, but you have to fly yourself. And I think, and that's why it's so important, at least for me, to not have that one teacher who teaches me or shows me, because basically a teacher cannot teach you something. They can only show you something. You have to teach yourself. But
ding, ding, ding.
Have a couple of people who do things very differently. I had two camera professors, totally different people. One said, do it this way. The other one said, no, do it that way. Who's right? So that's learning that stuff, learning to be able to do both without thinking. But again, spoiler for my next podcast episode. TVOOM.podomatic.com. By the way, for those of you who don't know, you can also on iTunes. So just go on iTunes, the TVOOM podcast. Okay. With that having said, one last thing about that, I think you can, coming back to photography school, I think that what you mostly learn, what is the goal of photography schools and photography courses, is to prepare you to become a professional photographer. And I think that's one of the reasons, because in professional photography, there are rules, there are standards that you have to be able to fulfill if you want to sell your photos to magazines, if you want to. And here's a comment on the chat: don't forget to mention the post-production. The digital possibilities are nearly endless. Very, very important. Yes, by David Prados. That's also what I saw on the curriculum of the photo classes. Huge part now, post-production, working with Photoshop, etc. Because that is just standard if you want to sell your photos, if you want to make money with your photos, if you want to make a living of photography. And that's what photography schools are good for, are there for, mostly. Because if a teacher can't help you to make a living of that, then they failed, and nobody will attend that school anymore, because let's face it, schools are also business. And so I think, and that's something I wanted to ask you. Well, first of all, do you have anything to add to my ramblings, Fern?
Well, yeah. So there's a couple of things. Hold on, I'm replying all kinds of tech info. All right. All right. So yeah. So there's a couple of things. One of the things is in the sciences, and for example, in the more complex math and so on, but even in basic math, what they do is exactly what you're saying. Yes, I can tell you 2 + 2 is 4, or you add this and you add this, square this, times this, parentheses, blah, 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 geometry, whatever, algorithms. But then you have to go in, here's the problem, and you not only come up with the solution, but you have to show the work. Okay? And so that's an important part of learning, because it's not you just doing it, but it's how you get there. And as when I taught, and this is something I was taught as well by several instructors, because I taught humanities courses, and it was, you know, essay-based responses and papers and so on. I wanted to know your process of thinking. I wanted to know what you saw in these readings, how you put them together, how you made sense, basically what you're saying. And I didn't care, which would blow students away because it's very rare to hear this. I didn't care whether you had a conclusion or you understood it or not. I wanted you to learn how to think with these concepts. The reason that is important, and I don't know about in Germany, but here, especially in when you get into the humanities, into, you know, later high school and in the university, the term critical thinking is used a lot. Oh, we want you to learn how to think critically. But if, as you said, you do not have the tools, you can't think critically. Right. And so what I learned from my dissertation chair especially was, I'm going to teach you this. This is the way I see things. This is the way I put, you know, this is what I think is going to teach you how to think. I don't want you to go outside and do more research. I want you to learn this. This is basic information, and these are basic concepts. Race, gender, whatever. Then y'all go out and do whatever you need to do. Right. But I want you to do and reject some stuff. And I used to teach a couple of the readings that I used to give students was stuff I disagreed with, or one of them was stuff I didn't understand. But the whole point is what you said. It's you learning how to think. The third thing is, and you kept reminding me of this, and I remember learning this when I went for my electronics technology 18-month course to learn how to do soldering and repair circuitry and stuff like that. They teach you the basics. You are trainable. Once you go out into the field, then all of a sudden you can start becoming trained in whatever area you start to go towards and so on. So in any field, I don't care if you're getting your PhD, I don't care, whatever. What they're doing is setting you up and preparing you for the outside world. And then in the outside world, you already have the basics, and then you go out. And I think how you get those basics, whether you get them online, whether you get them by going to classes, whether you get them by doing, but I think for each of us, understanding how these things work, and again, getting back to the whole thing, what you said, that now everybody can take a picture, that's wonderful. Right. Granted, there's a lot of bad photos out there, but you know what? Sometimes people will latch onto their creativity and enjoy it. And maybe do the learning, maybe not. You know, there's photographers. I was listening to somebody talking about online, somebody who uses the only photography they do is one of this shift focus
tilt shift. Tilt shift.
Tilt shift. This photographer.
Oh, that's of course. If I buy a tilt shift lens, then I will use it all of the time, because these things are darn important, darn expensive.
Yeah, but it's not. No, it's not that. Apparently, I mean, or for whatever reason, let's put it that way, for whatever reason, this guy only does tilt shift. You know what I mean? And there's people who only do flowers, and there's people who only do, and that's lovely. But I think, and it goes back again to that comment about, oh, school ruins the artist, let's say. I don't agree. I think what happens is sometimes we think, oh, I'm going to school because I'm going to be given all of this stuff. And that's not the way it works. Because to me, that of, you know, going to school and thinking, oh, I'm going to learn all this stuff is the equivalent of, hey, let's go out and shoot some pictures for a day so I can learn how to photograph.
Right, exactly.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. There has to be an engagement from you. You know what I mean? And there has to be a desire to explore. Because, and here's the other thing: look at Georgia O'Keeffe. Look at Pablo Picasso. Look at Vincent van Gogh. Look at what's this Cuban woman who is now being discovered, who did all these wonderful paintings starting in the 50s. Look at all of these famous artists who went to school, who studied the basics, and then who eventually said, no, this is what I want to do. And they went in their direction and they risked it. So for every person that you have that loses their talent or loses their desire, you have a whole stadium full. You have buttloads of people who have made careers and who have made names and who have changed history, who first knew the basics. So no, bottom line is bringing it full circle, because we're now an hour and 20 minutes. That's what I was trying to figure out. Okay, my pen isn't working. I was going to write you a note. No, I totally disagree with that idea that the create. But I think we as creative people have to find how we are going to adapt to that and be comfortable in what we're doing. I mean, and enjoy it. That's the other part.
I think I also disagree with that creativity gets lost. It's just, if you're really in a training program, like in photography school, film school, whatever, it is, you have to do stuff this way or that way. And that's just, I think people always forget, I think, at least that's how I see it, that nothing is like turning on a switch or flipping a switch. It's always, and especially if you learn something, you will learn new ways, and then you feel safe. Of course, you feel safe that way because you learned that, and then you will do it. And over time, you will hopefully become a bit more how do you say, more risky and more edgy. If not, then not. It's a thing that it's always, and that's, well, we're shortly running out of time, so I can
running out of time.
Running out of time. So sorry, because I had one idea. I had two ideas, but let's do that next time.
Wow, at once.
See, that's how I started the year 2018. I have two ideas, and I wrote them down, as you can see, and I wanted to do that in a podcast, but I'll have it written down so we can do it next time. So if indeed I see that, I saw that with all types of people in all sorts of art forms, that as soon as they had their training and their education, that things became a bit more, or in some cases even very much more streamlined. But over time, when they things will come back or not. But if not, then, well, if they're happy with that, and that's what this is all about, if they can make a living of that, perfect. If not, then not perfect, but that's the case. Yeah. And I saw that with a close friend of mine who is an amazing photographer, went to photography school, and that's what you saw. You definitely saw a shift and a change in her photography, and things became more streamlined and more mainstream. but now she's out of photography school for almost 2 years and something, and things start to evolve again in a different direction, and that is the fascinating and the interesting thing. And so also something that I have the impression that's the case with a lot of people. For sure, it was with me, that we always strive to get to that one point and then think everything is fine, everything will be fine here, and that is what I want to be. And then we're there and we realize, okay, no, it's not it. Let's go further. And I think that that is mine. That's what I wanted to explore a bit more. Your learning process and mine, but we can do that next time. Maybe we'll have a guest next time on the next show, so we can. Yes, we will have a guest next time, and maybe we can also. I have a lot of questions here, and I have a wonderful, interesting question. I think it's interesting because I messaged you. The question is that maybe you want to think about that to come up with an answer, but we can do that next time. So, well, 1 hour 25.
No, but by the way, I like being surprised. Like I like. I mean, you gave me like a quick hint.
You will be surprised with the other thing that I have in mind. And I let me check the chat once more. Amy Mochico wrote, I read somewhere you have to know the rules in order to break them creatively. Yes, if you don't know them, you can't break them. Then you just don't do it, right? Breaking something is a conscious thing.
Well, and here's the thing. Hold on. And here's the thing about breaking the rules. And I can speak to that specifically with my writing. When you're, and I've seen other people do it. And actually, my inspiration for breaking the rules the way I do it and having my own framework was Stephen King's The Shining, where he has this paragraph, and then he has a space, one word, murder, and then blah, 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 and keeps going. That, to this day, to me, is genius. Because what you need to do is, on the one hand, you need to bring in people to see to see things from the standpoint that they're used to seeing, because as innovative and as original as we want to think we are, we all have a map of the world, and we have certain expectations, and we have certain meanings, and we have certain cultural training of how to look at things. And so you lead the person to that, and then you make the breaks. Sometimes it's a small break, like Stephen King's. Sometimes it's larger breaks, but right. it's working on that foundation and then going and making that break.
That's the thing. And let me give you one example from filmmaking, because I think that's one of these big things. It's and now I don't know the English word. I'm stupid. Let me check the word, because I think that it's worth it.
You know, when you say you're stupid, you take all the fun out of it for me, because that's my job to say that. So, damn.
In filmmaking, I actually didn't know that term. In film, the English term. In filmmaking, we're talking about crossing the line. It's when you have with camera angles. So for example, you shoot an interview scene, like person one, person two talking with each other, and you have the camera from shooting from one angle, and then there's this you can't hold it there, like camera is like the webcam, right? And you can shoot, that's the rule, you can shoot in a 180-degree angle around that person, but you can't get behind, just cutting from that side of the people to the other side. That would be breaking or crossing the line. And that is a rule. You don't do that. And that's not a rule because someone said, you don't do that. That's bad style. It's just because it will irritate, and not irritate. That's my in German, there's the word irritieren, which means also can mean confuse, which confuses the viewer. So if you do that, you'll confuse the viewer because they lose their sense of space. They don't know where they are anymore. So you don't do that. And this is a perfect example for not breaking the rules or breaking the rules. You have to know the rules to break them, or you, like Amy wrote, you have, in order to break them creatively. If you want, so you have to know why you don't do that, why you don't cross the line. You can't go wrong if you don't cross it, so then you will be safe. But if you know why you don't do that, then you can do that for effect, like simple conversation between two people, and then something happens that completely kicks them out of their conversation. Then yes, why not cross the line to even get the viewer to have this sort of confusing moment. So that is what this breaking the rules for effect. It's rules are there because they are there for something. It's not like we don't do that. Like it's not religion, right? You don't do that because someone tells you to not do it, because everything has a reason. And if they can't tell you the reason, then forget about the rule. Again, it's not religion. Like religion is just like you have to believe, and if not, then nobody knows why, but you just don't do that. And
like art. Oh, art is perfect. You have to believe that the art. Yeah, we won't get it. Let's go that. That's another topic.
But that's the other type of artist. So I don't care for rules. I'm an artist. So, but why don't I get the recognition that I deserve because I'm an artist? So yeah, maybe because you just confuse people, and people sometimes confusing people is interesting and it's even exciting for them. But if you confuse them all of the time or really irritate them all of the time, then they will say goodbye and they will just say, I don't care for that. So if you really want to have an audience, you better know the rules and know when to use them and know when to not use them to make things a bit more exciting.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Having said, I think let's call it a day for today. 1.5 hours. That was a great start, I think, in 2018 with episode number 13 of InConversation.
Oh
Thank you so very much, Fern. It was like always a pleasure, even if we don't like to say that to each other, at least not on screen. But like as soon as the stream is off, we just virtually hug each other. I kiss Fern's bald spot, his tiny little small bald spot that he has, and all of that. Now he's turning red. I'm done. So
okay, no, as always, and thank you for everybody who joined us. Yeah, this is really cool, and I have to say, one of the things I really enjoy doing this is because, like with the teaching, and that's the other thing, and then I'll end. A really good teacher also, and I think I'm a good teacher, and this is one of the things that I learned from the best teachers I had. Also learns during the experience of teaching, during the prepping, and during the teaching and the conversation and the communication with the students. No matter what the topic, it doesn't have to be humanities. It could be the sciences. It could be algebra, whatever. You still, once you engage that human engagement, which is what sometimes is missing from the I'm an artist, well, you're not communicating because you're not using a language that anybody understands. Right. And that's why you need the rules. And this is in itself, and it's always a box full of chocolates. I mean, we might have decided and even have a guest or whatever, but as y'all who have joined us before know, it just takes on a form of its own. So thank you. Thank you for putting up with me. Now I'm going to get emotional because it's been over a year.
It's been over a year. And I thought, because we wanted to have a conversation in December, and so I brought you something, but then, well, first holidays and all of that, and then I was sick like a dog. I really was sick like I've been sick for like almost 2 decades. I was down with the flu. And I thought, and I have to switch the camera to me. I thought, I don't know what's in there. That's what a colleague from Italy brought me. And I thought that's the perfect, because I presume it's a bottle of wine. So I thought that would be a nice present. So maybe one day, and I'll open it up for you so that we all see.
Yeah,
So,
now I'm curious.
oh no, it's salami. So okay.
Oh, okay, so it's all yours.
Okay, then it's nothing.
Unless it's vegan salami, no.
I don't think it's vegan salami.
Oh, but there's some. Anyway, we won't get into that. All right. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all out there who were watching. And I'll just name. And there haven't been so many people on the chat, so I can call them all by name. Mention them all. Heiko Mulfahrt was on the chat. David Prados was on the chat. Amy Montico was in the chat. Marie V. By Lulette, by the way, so happy that you're back. Also very happy, wrote it in the chat, to see your photos on Tumblr again. Tamara K was on the chat, and I think, and Amy Montico, of course. Amy, goodbye, good night. Thank you all for watching. I hope you all had at least a fraction of a good time as we all had. So we all the two of us. So bye-bye. Till next time.